Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I rise in favour of the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Amendment Climate Trigger Bill 2020, the Greens bill that looks to introduce a climate trigger impact assessment into the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999, otherwise known as the EPBC Act. Now is the time for action. The world's leading climate scientists have told us we have a little over 10 years to cut our emissions in half. We have to get on with the job, Acting Madam Deputy President. Instead, of course, what we're seeing is emissions continuing to rapidly rise. We need a rapid transition to renewable energy. Australia's emissions keep going up, and we've got to do everything we can to get them to come down. This bill, Madam Acting Deputy President, is about trying to make sure things don't get worse. We've got a lot of work to do to reach the levels that the scientists are advising to reduce our pollution. The last thing we should be doing is making that job harder, and that's what this bill strives to address. We have a government that is effectively asleep at the wheel. When the country burns, as it has over this summer, when thousands of properties have been lost, dozens of people killed and over 1 billion animals are dead, when economists are estimating that the cost to the Australian economy of this summer's bushfires could reach as high as $1 billion, this government needs to stop acting as it is. We need to ensure that we reduce carbon pollution, and we have a plan to address climate change. The cost of Australia's climate fires over this summer is over 250 million tonnes of CO2. That's what's been estimated, a conservative estimate, to be released into the atmosphere. We already know the job to reduce climate change is already getting harder day by day. We have a government with its head in the sand, asleep at the wheel, insisting that technology, not real reform, is going to be enough. We need to put in place the rules, the laws, the plans that are going to ensure that we have a safe climate for our children's future. The current government response is simply not good enough. Our climate is on the brink of collapse as we continue to burn, mine, coal, oil and gas. Our ecosystem is crumbling. You can see that with the results of the environmental devastation that has happened just here in Australia over the last couple of months. Our precious native flora and fauna are rapidly becoming extinct. Our waterways, rivers and streams are becoming contaminated and dry. Yet we are somehow supposed to trust that this government has everything in hand, that they have the climate crisis under control. Well, they simply do not. We're somehow supposed to trust that this government will lead us on the world stage to meet our 2030 emissions reduction targets in a canter. Yet, of course, we know, Madam Acting Deputy President, that this is with cooking the books and trickery. The rest of the world has watched Australia burn this summer, knowing that we are at the forefront of the biggest threat that humanity has ever faced. They've seen a result of climate change with the climate fires that continued over summer, and they too want the world to act, and they want Australia to participate in that. No one trusts that this government is going to do it without a dramatic change of direction. We have a government that is beholden to the coal industry, the fossil fuel lobby. We have an opposition party that is paralysed by inaction. Yes, we have an opposition party who has, the last few days, announced a 2050 target, but they've got no plan as to how to get there. We need action now, Madam Acting Deputy President, not simply into the distant future. Not only are we seeing Australia's total emissions steadily climb, so too are we seeing increasing amounts of political donations to corrupt the majors from the fossil fuel to the corrupted majors from the fossil fuel lobby. In 2018-19 alone, fossil fuel donations to the Liberal, Labor and National parties amounted to more than $1.8 million. If you want to know what's holding climate action back in this country, that is the reason. This was up 48% from the $1.3 million the year before. And given Australia's track record at deliberately opaque, woefully inadequate political donation disclosure, the true figure is estimated to be at least 5 to 10 times higher. Here's a headline we should all be seeing. Australia's major political parties proudly brought to you by the fossil fuel industry. That's currently what is holding back our climate action, and we have to get real about the plans in place to reduce carbon pollution, to confront climate change and to ensure that we create a safe climate for our children's future. No other party but the Greens will call out the government and hold them to account in this manner. No other party but the Greens will keep fighting for real action on climate change. But we need to work cooperatively in this place if we are to deal with this most pressing threat to humanity, this most pressing threat to the health and survival of our planet. There are some simple things that need to be done to ensure we can take those steps needed to address the crisis that the scientists and the experts are warning of. Years ago, Ross Garnaut, when he wrote his report to this place about the threats of climate change, warned that bushfires, droughts, extreme weather would have a huge economic impact on our country, and that today is exactly what we are seeing. That is what we need to confront, and we need some steps to get there. This bill, this climate trigger bill, is one way to ensure that we can stop making climate change worse. Our environmental laws have simply not kept up with environmental reality. Right now, we are in an extinction crisis. We have 517 animals, 87 distinct ecological communities and over 1,300 unique plant species listed as nationally threatened. That's Australia's environment, threatened, at risk of extinction. And these numbers are all trending in the wrong direction, and this summer's climate fires have made that situation even worse. Globally, the UN tells us there are 1 million species under threat of extinction. And to add pressure to this scale and impact the fires have had on these vulnerable species, we are running out of time more than ever. It is simply not good enough to think that this climate emergency and extinction crisis is something that is out of sight, out of mind. It is not. It is happening right here, right now, and we have to make sure as political representatives, as the community voices in the parliament, that we stand up and do something. This is happening not in the distant future and not in some far-off land. It is happening right here in our backyard. And that is why we have introduced this climate trigger bill. The central point of this piece of legislation is to ensure that major projects, mining, oil and gas drilling, large-scale land clearing projects, are assessed for their impact on climate change. How much worse will they make the climate crisis? How much pollution will these projects emit? How much pollution are these projects going to put into the atmosphere and make it harder for us to deal with the climate emergency we all know we are facing? Madam Acting Deputy President, I think many members of the community would be shocked to know that despite having environmental laws in the federal level, national laws that are meant to protect our environment, that projects are meant to be assessed by, that we have no assessment as to what impact a project or an operation or a new mine will have in relation to climate change. When you put forward an application to set up a new mine, to open a new mine, whether that be in Queensland or South Australia or anywhere else, you should have to make sure you know how much worse your project is going to make climate change. And at the moment, that assessment is simply not done. The Adani coal mine can get a tick of environmental approval without having any assessment in relation to the impact that a massive big coal mine will have on the climate. And of course that's crazy, because we all know that digging up more fossil fuels, digging up more coal, shipping it off overseas, burning it, or sinking an oil well in the Great Australian Bight is going to have a huge impact on climate change. And when we're all working so hard and there is a desire to reduce pollution, to get global temperature rise capped at 1.5 degrees, the last thing we need is more pollution being put into the atmosphere. The last thing we need is to make it harder and tougher for us to reduce our pollution. This climate trigger bill is a simple, reasonable, logical step. If we are to reach net zero emissions, then we have to stop making the situation worse. We have to stop doing 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. Yes, we need to transition out of the fossil fuel industry into clean, green, renewable energy. Yes, we've got to become more energy efficient and use the technology advancement to our best to ensure that we can transition the whole economy. It becomes harder and harder and harder to do that the more and more new mines, new oil drilling projects, massive land clearing operations that occur that are going to make it more difficult to reduce our carbon pollution into the future. Our environment laws should simply assess projects on how much impact they have on the environment, and that has to include the impact on our climate, because we know that climate change is the biggest threat to the health and the safety and the protection of Australia and the world's environment. It's an impact and a threat to our economy, an impact and a threat to our health. We saw children over the summer wearing face masks to try and keep healthy from that terrible hazy smoke just here in Canberra. Children in Sydney going to the playground wearing face masks. That is the type of future we are looking at if we don't arrest dangerous global warming fast. There's a lot of debate already in this place and outside this place over the last few days as to what targets we should have. Well, we need to start now by reducing carbon pollution, not just in 2050. We have to start doing the hard work now, and one of the simple things we could do is to stop making the situation worse. We've got a lot of cleaning up to do. We shouldn't be creating more mess as we try and deal with it. We know that climate change is having a huge impact on some of our most precious places, our most precious parts of Australia's environment. I think about what's happened to my home state in South Australia over the summer. I think about the fact that 1/3 of the Adelaide Hills vineyards have been wiped out because of these climate fires. The economic impact of that on my state is going to continue for a long time. Here in the Canberra region, only last week, wineries declared that there would be no vintage this season because of the smoke taint of the grapes in the Canberra wine area. That's less jobs, that's less money, that's less services in our community. When I think about the environmental devastation of these fires, I think about the fact that 80% of the Blue Mountains World Heritage Area was devastated by fire. I think about the environmental and tragic impact of wiping out half of Kangaroo Island, our beautiful environment there and the precious animals that called that place home. Over half of the koalas on Kangaroo Island have perished in the fires. Our tourism industry is on its knees, our environment is in collapse, and this bill would at least have 1 step forward in the plan to address climate change. So I appeal to the opposition and the government. If you're serious about getting the targets right Let's stop making things worse and put in place the proper assessment of these projects into the future.
Thank you, Senator Hanson-Young.